thank you so much, Bonnie, for being here with us today. It's an incredible privilege to have your time.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this, Bronwyn. And I really am delighted to be able to reach out to the people who are maybe looking at our book. So that's very exciting to me.
It's very exciting. And your book is a huge hit, that's for sure. So, you know, speaking of your book, one of the first things I read right near the beginning about you and Julia, you said, we both have been taught that nutrition and diet were of trivial significance to mental health, and that only drugs or psychotherapy were of any value as treatments. Wow, you know, how much of a paradigm shift was it for you to look at the role of nutrients in mental health, and what sort of triggered that journey for you?
Oh, well, it was a huge shift, actually, Bronwyn. But you see, we are all products of our education, are we not?
Indeed.
And the people who were telling me that had never been taught what nutrients do in the brain. That's why one of the major triggers for me being motivated to write this book is a diagram that is in chapter 2. It has had the biggest impact on people's lives that of anything that I've ever shown on a slide. And on my website, I have a 4-minute video explaining just that also. It is a very simple concept. It's why our brains need minerals and vitamins, which I will call micronutrients, minerals and vitamins, every minute of every day. They are the cofactors that make our enzymes, enable our enzymes to work. Such a simple concept. And yet clearly, educated people are not being taught this. Our physicians are not being taught this by and large. But when I would show that slide and show what it meant in terms of, say, tryptophan being converted to serotonin, and everybody's heard about how good serotonin is for us, there was always this aha moment. And people would come up to me after my talks, and this has been going on for 15 years, saying, Bonnie, I never understood it before. And now I know why I have to choose my food carefully and eat better. And I thought, what a simple concept. But we weren't taught it in school.
Which is interesting, because, you know, in the nutrition field, I have been taught that in school. However, whenever I've shown it, I show a much more complex slide than you have. So you've really broken it down and highlighted just those nutritional cofactors and their roles.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I use that slide, and not, I mean, obviously it could be a hugely, the kind of complicated slide or figure that everybody, their brains just freeze over. They don't freeze over on the simplified one, thank goodness. But it also enables me to make another really important point. And that is our society is used to looking for a magic bullet, and especially for a single pill. And so if you have an infection, what do? You take one thing, an antibiotic. If you have X, you take Y. It's as simple as that. And our funding agencies support that because they fund research on single nutrients at a time. We've had funding agencies send back grant applications to very competent clinical trialists saying, this is a great study, but we're not going to fund it. Would you please pick one nutrient? Those are people who had never looked at something like that figure in chapter 2 that explains the diversity of micronutrients that are needed in the pathways at all times. How can you pick one nutrient when you look at a graph or a figure like that, you know?
Absolutely. So that's been really quite revolutionary that you've gone down this broad spectrum multi-nutrient or micronutrient approach.
Well, it came to me, and this story is told in the introduction, okay? It came to me, this wasn't my brilliant insight, Bronwyn. I don't want to, this is being recorded. I don't want anyone to misinterpret. It was not my brilliant insight. It was the insight of a man named David Hardy working with a man named Tony Stephan, who were just trying to solve serious mental health issues in Tony's family. And because David Hardy knew that that's the way we supplement farm animals, that was what he thought to do for people. Very simple concept, right?
Isn't it? Such a simple concept. And you know, that's really interesting for me, because you actually say in the book as well, if some of these minerals are deficient or absent from the soil, the plants will be deficient and the animals or the people eating the plants will be deficient. Now, in New Zealand here, we have a huge agri event called Field Days, and I was invited to speak there this year on wellbeing in the agri space. And as I was walking around, I just was amazed at the nutrition science that's at play for the animals and for the plants, and that it's mainstream and very scientific in the agri sector, but it's not mainstream in human health. Why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is? Well, I'll quote somebody. I don't remember his name, so it has to be anonymous, but it was a PhD physiologist who worked in one of our agricultural research stations in Alberta. Alberta has lots of cattle and hog farms. And he was telling me how, of course, it's all accurate that we need to be feeding people a broad spectrum of micronutrients. And why was this not transferred from animal research? He said, the first thing you have to know is there are more PhD physiologists in just Alberta, one of the provinces, studying nutrition in terms of animal health than there are in human health for the entire nation of Canada. That's the first thing to understand. People just haven't been interested. And secondly, it's follow the money trail. And it's bias. If we humans really are looking for a magic bullet, we have to teach people to stop doing that and demand from their physicians that they stop doing it. But right now, where the money is with pharmaceutical treatments of mental health problems. You cannot patent minerals and vitamins in any meaningful way. You don't market them in a way that will raise money.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of health claim restrictions too. So that's interesting as well, because you've gone down this route of staying very separate in terms of funding from even the pharmaceutical companies or the formulas that you've chosen to study. Why was that important
why I
to
did
you?
That I've been the influence behind that. Do you want to know why?
Yeah, please, yes.
Because I'm old. And that means when I was in training, Bronwyn, I knew that no physician or medical scientist was considered to be ethical if they took money from a company to do research. And I watched this huge swing away from that to the point by, I don't know what year, but certainly by the present point, 100% of the clinical trials of drugs are funded by the pharmaceutical companies. That's a big change. But there was, when I was in training, it didn't touch me. I was training in basic science stuff, but and psychology too. But the people around me, I was always in medical faculties, and it was just considered to be morally wrong, ethical. Maybe that's not the right word. Ethically wrong.
Ethically.
It's a question of scientific integrity.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting, isn't it?
I remember those days.
So the age was the reason there.
And at a certain point, with the two gentlemen I mentioned who eventually formed a company, and multiple occasions we sat down and talked about, well, how could they foster research without being seen to bias it, to be corrupting it, etc. And I was the one who led them to certain guidelines about what they should support by providing free products and free placebos, and how they should stay out of any kind of and keep the scientists staying out of any kind of conflict of interest. So, and I've never regretted it. And I don't think any of my other colleagues have too. That means it's a little more, it's harder. And that's why I have two charitable funds where I've raised and distributed about $900,000 to fund research. And I'm always looking for people who are interested in making donations. So, because
absolutely. And that's on your website, isn't it? Bonnie J. Kaplan. That's on your website where we can go to contribute.
That's right. BonnieJKaplan.com. Actually, everything we talk about today is probably on that website.
On the website. You've got a fabulous website. I definitely recommend people spending some time there. And you've got links to lots of fabulous videos and of both yourself and Julia. And much information that I think is fabulous. So I definitely recommend people checking out bonniejkaplan.com.
Okay.
And even with the book, I know, you're trying to, this isn't to fund your retirement either. It's
No, I always say that we wrote this book, and I know Julia, my co-author, Julia Ruckledge, agrees with me that we did not write this book for fame or fortune. I mean, for me, fame is irrelevant. I'm retired. And for her, I mean, she's just not a self-aggrandizing person, is she?
She's
and
not, and yet she's very well known in New Zealand as well, and
yes,
very, very respected.
Of course. And so the reason we wrote it is we really just want to change the way mental health treatment is provided, and that's in chapter 12. Which speaking for myself, I had more fun writing that chapter than any of the rest of the book, because it's really a vision for a logical, rational future, and it's achievable. So
it is. And it's fabulous. As I said, my background is in nutrition. I have a Master's of Science in Personalized Nutrition. And for me to see people coming from fields outside of nutrition and putting the value, and what I found very interesting actually in your plan for the future is, although you've done so much study on using multi-nutrient formulas, your first step is really about changing diet.
Oh, absolutely. All of us who've been studying multi-nutrients in pill form realize that what we have had is a very powerful proof of principle. It's so much easier. Like the people who are studying whole of diet, there's no placebo. And so like the Maddie trial that was just published, that Jenny Johnstone at Oregon Health and Science University was the head of, I'm sure she would agree with the same thing. Any of us think that, first of all, we have to improve our diet, which, by the way, means improving the growth of our food, improving our soil. But in addition to the fact that the pill form has given us a proof of principle, there is something else. And we deal with this in the book too. There are multiple reasons why, for some people, even eating a really excellent Mediterranean style whole foods diet might not be enough. And I think it's important that people know about these explanations, because the last thing we want people to do is to feel guilty, like, oh, I'm not being pure enough. I'm not a purist about anything, Bronwyn. So exactly. I just think, people who are doing a really good job of getting rid of the garbage and extra carbs and ultra processed food and really eating a whole foods diet, sometimes they still benefit from nutrients in pill form. And so those should be available to them.
Absolutely. And to know that there's an evidence base behind them. I think that's what is really important. And you just mentioned something there in terms of, if the fruit and vegetable even contain what we need, how do we as consumers know that how do we make our choices there?
Yeah. Well, first, remind me if I forget to come back to that. I just want to say something, because earlier you commented that you had been in an agricultural kind of meeting and everybody was talking about nutrients. And that's no surprise to me, but I think that you should ask whether or not they would permit you to address them. One of the most exciting series of talks I've given over the last 5 years, well, it isn't a series, but a bunch of different talks, has been to agricultural meetings, because the audience is absolutely riveted to find out that what they have been struggling to do, improving our food supply, is so important for human brain health. They are, I can't tell you, I finished talks at agricultural meetings and had a lineup right out the door with people wanting to share their stories and how much this meant to them, because they've got their head to the ground, literally, but knowing that this matters for humanity is very powerful. So I'll be happy to help you with some slides. Now, what was the question?
Wonderful. That would be great. Well, it was just about, how do we as consumers make choices around the foods that we buy? I know you've done a little bit as well on, comparisons of organic, or, do we need to be spending more on organic? How do we ensure that we get?
This is from a study that hasn't been published, but it really was a bit of a surprise. I am certain that organic farmers are better stewards of our soil. And so let's give them a lot of credit for that. And the ones who are really focused on pesticide-free crops deserve a lot of support, and we should be buying our produce from them. But we just happened, as part of a larger comparison of soil assays of 40 samples collected across Western Canada, we happened to have two fields that were almost exactly adjacent, and one was organic and one was not. Now, everybody knows that even an organic farmer will have pesticides in their crops that blows over from the adjacent. So, I mean, they weren't it's very hard to be perfectly organic in that situation. But we were amazed to see no difference in the mineral profile between the two soils. Now, that's just one-off. I still am fully convinced that we need to support regenerative agriculture. We provide some websites in there. Support the people who are trying to get away from glyphosate, which has just done so much harm in North America. I don't know about New Zealand.
Yeah, it's still used here, unfortunately. So it's such a chelator of those minerals from the soil too, as well as other things. I think, that move to regenerative farming is really that next step as well. And I've seen a big move in this field days over the last few years as well, that's certainly picking up in New Zealand. Just before you go, I'm very conscious of your time and so grateful that we have your time. I had a question from one of the attendees of our book club, and there's quite a lot in here, so you may like to just choose one or two parts of it to respond to. But this is someone who, as she said, someone who's very keen on natural health and therapeutics, and finds the negative media around why we should not take supplements and nutrients confusing, because the marketing sometimes seems really compelling, and then there's all the dangers of the contraindications or the drug nutrient interactions, and it's just so much confusion. I think she said, 1 week we need animal fats, 1 week we don't, and there's a lot to the question. But I think really I see a lot of negative media around supplementation in particular.
So the second important reason that Julie and I wrote this book, again, this is from my perspective, I don't know what hierarchy or priorities she would list, is that we wanted to educate the general public, because in spite of the fact that there are 50, 60, 70, I don't know how many peer-reviewed articles that are very relevant, a large evidence base in medical and especially a lot of psychiatry journal articles showing the relationship between nutrition and mental health, we cannot get any media coverage. And we write essays and the media rejects them. And in all of the years that I've been studying nutrition and mental health, I know of only one trial that kind of got picked up by national media. I'm speaking through my, North American viewpoint here. And that was one of the Australian whole of diet studies. And I don't know why, it just captured interest, I guess. But that's 1 out of 60, 70, I don't know how many. So you got to ask yourself why. And I've really come to conclude, for some other reasons too, that it's a matter of following where the money is.
Right.
And unfortunately, pharmaceutical money funds a lot of our daily life in North America. I'm sure they pour a lot of money into the media, into newspapers, and they're not the people there know which side of their bread the butter is on. Do you know that expression?
Exactly.
I think
it's interesting too, because I believe that New Zealand is one of the only countries outside of America that allows direct to consumer marketing of pharmaceuticals.
Yes. So what you have, it's the US and New Zealand. And because we sit on the American border and we see all their TV, we get all of their ads. So Canada is saturated with them too. But one of the things I've noticed in terms of the print media, I noticed this a few years ago, and I wish I'd been documenting it, but there would be nothing about vitamins and minerals being dangerous, which they're not, right? We've evolved to need them. There's never been a death in all of Canada recorded since they started keeping records in 1967. Never a serious adverse event. as a result of vitamins and minerals. So it's just ridiculous. Think of all the people who have trouble from psychiatric. Anyway, I've noticed there'll be no articles about danger. And then all of a sudden, I'll notice some in our local newspaper, 2 or 3 over 4 weeks, maybe in our national paper. It's like a flurry of them, like, oh, let's remember to tell folks, don't take vitamins and minerals. They're dangerous. Where's the money coming to sponsor that? I can't follow that trail.
Especially when it comes like that. And I think media, I don't know if you have a similar experience there, but I've noticed that there seems to be this movement towards more negative press on a number of factors. I know my husband's company presents economy figures, and when New Zealand rebounded really well after the lockdowns last year, before that, the media was very, very interested in hearing the bad data of how the economy was suffering. But once we were doing well again, it was picked up by far less outlets. I think there's just a slight negative bias on all media, on all topics in a way. And this is such a good news story. This research is such a positive good news story.
And it puts the potential to improve our mental health in our own hands.
Yes.
And it's all fixable. Well, I don't know, it's all fixable, but it is something we can work on. And it is a good news story. But have you ever heard the saying, if it bleeds, it leads?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's our news media.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah. Absolutely. So the other question, I guess, this is a very broad one, but came from a member of our book club as well, is just where do we start understanding our own personal situation? Now I know you talk about this near the end of the book, actually, around whether there's blood tests and what you've found there. And
yeah, so I urge people to read about why testing, it's not that testing is wrong. Sometimes it's important that we have blood tests done for any number of different things, but we cannot count on test results to guide our behavior when it comes to diet and nutrition. And the simple explanation is that the blood tests are from peripheral blood. They don't show what's in the brain, but more importantly, they don't show what your brain needs. So, for example, Bronwyn, maybe you need more magnesium than I do for certain pathways. Maybe I need more vitamin B6 than you do, and then we have no tests in the brain for that. And so it's a challenge. And so all that we can do is to try to eat our very best. And that means get rid of all the carbs and processed sugars and ultra processed things that are called ultra processed foods, but they're not food. Convince yourself of that by beginning to take a look at the micronutrient content. It's just not there. So you figure that there are at least 30 micronutrients, and they never list more than 4 or 5.
Exactly. We're so focused on macros, aren't we, for health? That's what's on labels. I have so many people come to me. They want support on balancing their macros, not on balancing their micros. It's like,
Yeah. So we explain that in the book too.
You do.
Could I just end with a comment? Because this is going to be seen by people in your book club. Yes. I just want to say that I had no idea it would be so exciting to talk to so many people who are so interested in what we have to say. We tried to make it really for the general public with lots of stories and anecdotes, all of which are quite true. And we're told, if you look at the Amazon reviews, that it is very easy and pleasant read. But we urge everybody to do something. And if they want to correspond with me, you can do so on my website, because maybe there's something you can do to try to change the status quo. That's what I want to see from the book. And I hope that some of the people in your book club find that interesting.
I'm sure they will. And I think, I found you from another book club, your willingness to give of yourself in this way. This is to me, this is not about promoting book sales. This is about you so generously giving your knowledge and your time and your enthusiasm and your expertise to support people's health. and well-being. And it's just so authentic, the way that you are giving. This is a Saturday afternoon on your time that you're recording this for me. Not committed enough to get up at 1:30 a.m., I say to the
No.
hence why we've pre-recorded. But, I thank you and Julia so much for writing this book, for publishing this book. But I also very much thank you for things like this. This is many, many places that you'll see Bonnie popping up, giving of her time, helping educate people, not because she wants to sell the book, but because you believe so much in the findings that you have found that you didn't even expect to find when you set out for this.
Right.
This was a surprise to you.
Julie and I both entered this thinking, this is trivial. This isn't important, but it's very important.
Very important, and it's changing lives. So thank you so much, Bonnie, for the book, for your research, and for your time today.
Okay. Bye for now.